Continuing our coverage now, following the Supreme Court ruling upending a bulk of President Trump's tariffs. Joining us now is Dr. Jared Pinson, Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University. Thank you for joining us on the National News Desk. First of all, digging right in, how did this move impact the everyday American taxpayer? You know, the list is long, from 401ks to groceries to cars. What do you think the impact will be?
Well, the first thing is that wasn't answered actually is what's happening with the tariff revenue that has been raised at this point. And that's a question that the Supreme Court didn't answer, because there could be several $100 billion of rebates that are going back to businesses. When that ends up getting answered, will help answer some of the other questions that you gave. Because as of right now, all of that tariff revenue that was raised has not been refunded and isn't being refunded.
And as the president suggested today, that will likely result in a legal showdown. To your point, we'll have to wait and see. We have seen stocks from big businesses like Nike and Abercrombie and Fitch rise since the announcement. But what about small businesses? What impacts do you foresee coming out of this for them?
Well, the first thing for all businesses is this will help clarify what authority the president has. So the biggest issue here has been the uncertainty. The president has put on tariffs, one day is taking them off the next day. And this ruling limits the scope as to what type of tariffs he can put on. So that certainty is important for businesses, both large and small. And that'll simply help with future planning. One of the headwinds in the economy last year was that uncertainty and businesses not knowing where to deploy their capital because they didn't know what their cost structure was going to be. And so that was an issue, and this has now at least clarified that a bit.
Well, you speak about, the need for clarification and not knowing, but I think there are more questions following the president's announcement today, some saying that his decision more limited than it appears, because as we saw today, the president's push for tariffs is not going to go away. Do you think they'll just be replaced?
Well, the ruling was narrow in that it was a very specific aspect of the law that the Supreme Court was ruling on. So the president does have authority with tariffs on a bunch of sections. So Section 232, Section 301, Section 122. There's a whole bunch of authority that he has with this, and this was one narrow ruling on that. So it wasn't a strike down of all tariffs, but it was more of he can't just do what he wants. And these other sections within law have limitations as to timeline and even size of the tariffs. What the administration was doing before was putting on tariffs at basically whatever level or levy that they thought was appropriate, and that's limited severely. So what we should expect is some of the cost pressures that businesses were facing from these tariffs to be lessened considerably. Now, how long that takes to flow to consumers, that's the question we don't have right now.
Dr. Jared Pinson, Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University, thank you for your insight tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Our coverage tonight, the Supreme Court's ruling today didn't only strike down President Trump's global tariffs, but also handed him a tough loss on an issue crucial to his economic agenda as the midterm elections inch closer. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris joins us. And Jeff, the economic impact of this ruling, it could affect countries all across the globe. You spoke with economists tonight. What are you learning?
So while the impact won't be felt immediately, we're told the Supreme Court's ruling earlier today could help slow inflation while also dropping the average household's tariff burden. Some economists also saying despite President Trump considering the ruling a loss, it could end up helping in the long run. Shortly after the Supreme Court 6-3 ruling Friday, President Trump saying he will impose a global 10% tariff, which falls under a law that restricts them to 150 days unless Congress steps in.
Other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives, great alternatives. Could be more money. We'll take in more money.
The majority found it's unconstitutional for the president to unilaterally set and change tariffs because taxation power belongs to Congress. But Trump lashing out, saying the ruling is deeply disappointing.
And I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
Tucker Balch, a finance professor at Emory University, telling the National News Desk he believes this tariff ruling by the Supreme Court will impact Americans by slowing inflation, likely reducing household costs, and providing some cost relief for small businesses.
There's no question about it. Even though President Trump is responding by resetting, putting back some tariffs. They're not at the same levels that they were before, and it'll also affect the ability for Americans to buy things at a lower price.
Federal data shows the Treasury has collected over $133 billion from the import taxes directly imposed under the Emergency Powers Law. Following Friday's ruling, political and business leaders speaking out, pressing the administration for refunds, including Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker writing this letter to Trump demanding $1,700 for the over 5 million households in Illinois. And California Governor Gavin Newsom, who posted on X, quote, Trump's tariffs were illegal from day one.
A tax increase on ranchers, on farmers, on small businesses, on you and me. Donald Trump should return that money immediately.
Now, despite the Trump administration expressing disappointment in Friday's ruling, Balch believes it could end up helping in the long run, especially as economic approval ratings continue slipping.
So the Supreme Court ruling out these tariffs is going to be good for the economy, and the administration will benefit from that benefit.
Now, over 1,000 companies currently have lawsuits challenging these tariffs, but the administration has signaled that it will litigate refund claims, suggesting the process could take years before any businesses see actual repayments. Reporting for the National News Desk, I'm Jeff Harris.
Jeff, thank you. We start tonight with Ryan Smith at the live desk with the president's alternative approach, Ryan, that is already in motion. What are you learning?
Yeah, Dee, tonight, of course, we start here at the White House. A live look there tonight where President Trump, he is already moving quick on this, signing a new executive order, placing a temporary 10% tariff on all foreign imports, with the exception, though, of Mexico and Canada. Now, earlier today, he went right on the attack, targeting 2 Supreme Court justices he appointed who today ruled against him.
Justices Gorsuch and Barrett, are you surprised in particular by their decision today? And do you regret nominating them?
I don't want to say whether or not I regret. I think their decision was terrible. Yeah. I think it's an embarrassment to their families. You want to know the truth, the 2 of them.
As you can imagine, check it out, reaction pouring in. We've been monitoring it all day long here in response to that 6-3 decision. Trump's tariffs were imposed under what's called Emergency Powers Law. The High Court, though, ruling that requires approval from Congress.
The court agreed with what Democrats have said from day one. A president cannot ignore Congress and unilaterally slap these tariffs on the American people.
Small business groups like the Main Street Alliance, which represents about 30,000 small business owners across the country, they are applauding this ruling, stating here in part, quote, the court just reminded everyone that emergency powers are not a blank check. Now the focus should be on refunding the businesses that were effectively taxed under an unlawful framework. Now, some Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill now vowing to help Trump reestablish his tariff policy. House Speaker Mike Johnson saying in response here, quote, the president's use of tariffs has brought in billions of dollars and created immense leverage for America's trade strategy. Congress and the administration will determine the best path forward in the coming weeks.
I'm Christine Frizzau in Washington, where tonight a monumental decision from the U.S. Supreme Court has come down. In what is a major blow to President Donald Trump, justices struck down a policy central to the president's economic agenda: tariffs. The overriding question to the High Court: does the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, authorize President Donald Trump to impose tariffs? The answer, in a 6-3 ruling, a resounding no.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing.
The 3 liberal justices, joined by Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Chief Justice John Roberts, who wrote the opinion, connected the issue to the founding of the country itself, writing, quote, Americans fought the revolution in no small part because they believed that only their elected representatives, not the king, not even Parliament, possessed authority to tax them, adding, the framers gave that power to Congress alone.
Roberts and others clearly viewed this as a tax that rests with Congress.
President Trump vowing to use other laws to try to keep his tariffs in place, as they've already brought in about $200 billion in revenue, also insisting the country still faced a national emergency due to the influx of illegal drugs from countries like Canada, Mexico, and China, and because of unfair trade deficits.
We were being ripped off by almost every single country in the world, had some massive surpluses. China had hundreds of billions of dollars in surpluses with the United States. They rebuilt China. They rebuilt the army.
Legal experts say the decision is not the end of the road for the Trump administration, but things will be made far more difficult.
Essentially, court is saying you have to go back to the drawing board and you have to do it country by country. Individual countries have to be shown to be engaged in unfair trade practices or have to be shown to be a national security threat.
There is a major question the Supreme Court did not answer. What happens to all the revenue already collected from tariffs? In his dissenting opinion, Justice Kavanaugh wrote those billions of dollars in refunds would have significant consequences for the U.S. Treasury. The process of returning that money, he said, is, quote, likely to be a mess. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no, no matter how good a case you have. It's a no. But you can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people. Others think they're being politically correct, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court, and it's happened so often with this court. What a shame. Having to do with voting in particular, when in fact they're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. It's a small movement. I won by millions of votes. We won in a landslide. With all the cheating that went on, there was a lot of it, but we still won in a landslide. Too big to rig. But these people are obnoxious, ignorant, and loud. They're very loud, and I think certain justices are afraid of that. They don't want to do the right thing. They're afraid of it. This was an important case to me, more as a symbol of economic national security, and also, I would say, just for our country itself, so important, because we're doing so well as a country. We've never done so well. The good news is that there are methods, practices, statutes, and authorities, as recognized by the entire court in this terrible decision, and also as recognized by Congress, which they refer to, that are even stronger than the IEEPA tariffs available to me as President of the United States. And in actuality, I was very modest in my ask of other countries and businesses because I wanted to do, and it's very important, I wanted to be very well behaved because I wanted to do anything, I didn't want to do anything that would affect the decision of the court, because I understand the court. I understand how they are very easily swayed. I want to be a good boy. I have very effectively utilized tariffs over the past year to make America great again. Our stock market has just recently broken 50,000 on the Dow, and simultaneously, and even more amazingly, broken 7,000 on the S&P, two numbers that everybody thought upon our landslide election victory could not be attained. Think of that. Nobody thought it was possible to do it within 4 years, and we did it in 1 year. They said, you'll never be able, you'll go back and you read the geniuses, read their statements, all of the Nobel Prize winners in economics. They said, no, you couldn't do it in 4 years. Well, we didn't do it in 4 years. We did it in 1 year. We broke every record in the book, and we're continuing to do so.